All right, Andrew Sobel, we are live here on LinkedIn. It's great to be speaking with you. I am Dorie Clark. I'm here with my friend Andrew Sobel. How are you doing? You are in New Mexico right now, sheltering in place, right?
Yeah, that's right, Dorie. We split our time between Manhattan and Santa Fe, where we have a home, and so we came out. My wife and I came out nearly 2 weeks ago. Touch wood, and so we're going to stay here for a little while. But we've got family in New York, children, adult kids in Manhattan and Seattle, all the hot spots. So we're keeping pretty busy.
Yes, absolutely. And I am coming to you live from the financial district here in New York. I have the noontime sunbeam slicing through my apartment, so I may be shifting throughout the course of our time together. But Andrew, I'm especially excited to talk to you because you have a new book out. It is going to be coming out officially next week. It is called "It Starts with Clients." And it is a book about how to build and strengthen your client relationships in this challenging time. You didn't necessarily know it was going to be so challenging when you wrote the book, but suddenly it's I would say especially relevant.
Yeah, it certainly is, and of course some of the tactics are going to change, and there's some things we need to emphasize in the coming weeks and months with clients, but there also are a lot of evergreen principles that I think are always essential for relationship development. Dorie, what I'm telling my clients right now is that sales or business development may have slowed, may have even stopped completely, but client relationship building should not. And because there's all kinds of things we can do to strengthen our client relationships, even when there's not a lot of ongoing work. And in the end, right, relationships are what lead to effective business development and growth of your business. So I think this is a critical topic right now.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Andrew. And I just want to take a minute to greet some of the people that are here watching us live. We're so excited to have you guys. I see Nikunj is here. We have Nikki who's here. Misty is here from Santa Barbara. If you guys haven't actually typed in where you're from, we'd love to hear it. So Andrew's in Santa Fe. I'm in New York City. We'd love to hear where you guys are from. Nancy, hey there. Mohammed, we're glad to have you. Patricia is here. She says hi to us both. No Bin is here, and Wanda. Judy is joining us. Chad, shaking it up from Nashville. Dorothy is hi. Anand is hi. We are thrilled to have you guys here and have a great conversation. Oh, good. Robert is from North Carolina, my home state. Juliet's coming in from the UK. I see Suzanne from Toronto, and Julianne is from New Glarus, Wisconsin. Let's hope there is no coronavirus there. That sounds like a coronavirus-free locale in New, wait, what was that? New Glarus. I love it.
Fantastic.
Anyway, Andrew, I want to, and by the way, guys, feel free to type in your questions to me and to Andrew into the chat box. We're going to be taking them throughout the course of our time together as well. But Andrew, I just wanted to start out with you because I was talking to a colleague the other day, like yesterday, literally, by which I mean the other day, and she said that in the past week, she's lost 40% of her business. And I think, so many people are seeing this. We had 3 million unemployment claims last week, an unprecedented number. Yeah. It really seems like in a lot of ways, it's kind of a cascade effect. I've had, people that I work with say, oh, sorry, I have to put our services on hold because my clients aren't paying me. And so it creates this crazy domino effect. So, when we're in a situation like that, where I think a lot of people, thankfully, I know I have spent, and you have as well, a lot of time over the past few years developing multiple income streams so that we, like online courses and things like that. So we are not so pressured in this moment. But for a lot of people, this is very frightening. How can you be relating to clients when you might yourself be feeling a sense of panic or scarcity? How can you, we know you shouldn't be needy or demanding or whatever, but how can you play it cool and actually do things the right way when you might be like, oh my God, my business is drying up?
Yeah, Dorie, that's a big question and a really important one. And clearly, look, let's be honest. There are going to be parts of this equation that are completely out of our control. So, Stephen Covey used to talk about circle of influence, circle of control. And so some things there's not a lot we can do about, but there are other things we can do with our clients right now. And I'm going to be honest, I think it actually, the first place to start is up here, which is our kind of attitude and mindset about what's going on. And then I can get into some specific techniques in a minute, but I start with our mindset. And there's a couple of mindset shifts that we have to make in a crisis like this. The first one I mentioned, which is from stop thinking about selling and getting the next project and start thinking about relationship development. The second shift that I actually think will be useful for people in making themselves useful to their clients is something I've talked about in a number of my books. And I call it moving from the expert for hire mindset to the client advisor mindset. And the difference is very simple. Of course, we need deep expertise. And you've written some great books on how you develop that. But if that mindset can be limiting. And so you're focused on a solution you provide, a particular niche you serve, versus I'm in the business of helping my clients solve some of their toughest priorities, needs, and problems. And I'll give you a quick example of that. Go back to 2008 when we had a huge recession. And an acquaintance of mine was a recruiter, an executive search consultant. And he said to me, Andrew, I'm like out of business. I mean, clients don't even want to see me because they're saying we're not hiring anyone. And the problem was, after I talked to him a bit, was that he defined himself as being in the business of filling a specific position for a client. Other colleagues of his who were getting welcomed with open arms to chat define themselves as being in the whole business of talent, attraction, acquisition, development, retention, leadership, and so on. They define that, they open the lens. So here's my point. You have to bank on your client knowledge now and your knowledge of their organizations and help them in any way you can. And that might be, so for example, one of my clients is in a leadership development firm. They do training and consulting around leadership, and they had all their projects were suddenly stopped. But what they were able to do in a small way was shift to doing coaching sessions with a number of their clients' leaders on crisis management, right? So what I'm seeing is people shifting their focus from maybe the existing project need to a new need. So that's one thing I would kind of sit back and say, for clients I've been serving or am serving, are there some more short-term needs that I can shift to and how do I maybe reconfigure a project that's already sold? The other thing is, look, you got to walk in your client's shoes. You're not going to be empathetic with them. And I think the first response is talking to people and asking them how they are. How are they feeling? How are their families? What's going on inside their organization? What are the big concerns of their leadership right now? And that's going to then give us some clues as to how we can be helpful.
Yeah, that's really wonderful, Andrew. Thank you for sharing that. And it reminds me in a lot of ways, you hear the sort of old story, but very powerful about, the companies that went out of business 100 years ago were the ones that said, I make buggy whips.
Yeah, exactly.
And the ones that work, that are still around are the ones that say, well, I provide transportation solutions. And so we need to be the modern, we have a cameo. I like that. We have extra value added expertise here. But we have to be the sort of modern day knowledge worker equivalent of that. How can we be sort of avoid, if I understand what you're saying correctly, in many ways, it's getting out of the sort of specialist mentality. Yes. And being more of a generalist and saying, well, what does my client need? And what are the places where my expertise could conceivably overlap with that, even if that's not how I'm presently, thinking of myself?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, I think that so one of my principles is lower your threshold for a client conversation. A lot of us feel like to talk to a client, we've got to have PowerPoint slides. I work with some big companies, and when they go to see a client, there's a big deck and it's all very prepared. And whereas actually now you have to make it easy to talk to a client. And years ago, I advised UBS, the big bank, on their client development strategies. And the president at the time, Ken Moelis, who now has his own investment bank, Moelis & Co., and everybody called him Kenny, a brilliant client relationship person. And Kenny said to me, Andrew, if I waited to go see a client until I had a great idea, I'd leave my office every 2 years. So part of that expert mindset is, I need something really big to talk to a client about. I need a really incisive idea. And the truth is, you can actually call up a client and share some observations about what you're seeing in the market, right? You can ask them some thoughtful questions, which we can get into. What kinds of questions should we be asking clients now? So I think we got to lower that threshold and not put a big barrier to saying, wow, I've got to have something big if I call a client up. You can have a great conversation with a client just by asking a few questions, sharing a few things. And that's, by the way, just one other idea for people. I think to be really effective with clients, you want to be seen by them as being at the crossroads of the marketplace. So in other words, I work with a lot of, any firm that's building, kind of consultative relationships. So a lot of professional services firms, a lot of banks, technology companies. But the point is, I'm always out there talking to people. I'm calling clients. I'm asking them what's going on. They're calling me. I feel like I'm in the flow. And the more you're in the flow, the more you know, and the more helpful you can then be to clients, and the more they want to talk to you. So think about this idea. How are you, everybody listening to this broadcast, are you at the crossroads of the marketplace? Are you getting out into the flow? I think it's really critical.
Yeah, that's so valuable, Andrew. I love that. And I just want to mention for people who are watching the live stream, some of you guys are experienced LinkedIn Live viewers. Some of you, maybe your first time tuning in. LinkedIn Live is a relatively new feature. It's still in beta. So many people are kind of figuring it out. But if you like this conversation, if you are finding it valuable, you can actually take it and share it in your own feed. There is, just like with any LinkedIn post, you see a share button with the arrow, and you can share this with your colleagues to spread the word about it, and keep commenting, keep asking your questions. We're excited to engage with you. Stuart wrote in. He says, he wants to ask some questions to the cat, because they always know. It's true. They definitely know better than we do. He gives me all my best ideas. Tassos mentions, I had a recruiter contacting me yesterday. Companies try to snatch each other's talents, it seems. I think during a downtime, the enterprising ones certainly do. We have Arturo sending greetings from San Luis Potosi, Mexico. Welcome, Arturo. And
bienvenido.
Oh, yes. And Kristen says, love that executive search example. That's exactly what I'm thinking about right now. Spot on. So I think we're definitely hitting a chord here. So I will, we want to make sure that we're taking questions from you guys shortly. And so I'm just going to say to John, my assistant, who is monitoring things, John, if you want to either log in here to ask us in real time, or feel free to text me. The one trick about LinkedIn Live being in beta is that I have to go to a separate window to look at your questions. So I'm not able to get all of them. So that's why I have John's assistants coming in. So John, be ready with any key questions that are coming in. But to your point, Andrew, that you raised, I actually wanted to chime in on this. So you talked about powerful questions, and you one of the very first ways that I connected with you. I mean, you've written a ton of really great books. Probably your most famous, I would say, is called Clients for Life. If you haven't read that, everybody get that one. That's a classic. But one of my personal favorites, which I really think is a fantastic business book, I really highly recommend it, is called Power Questions. It was a book that Andrew wrote a few years ago. And I'm curious, tell us a little bit about the book, Andrew. What are power questions, and how might they be useful in a circumstance like this?
Yeah. So interesting story, by the way. The original title of it was Powerful Questions, but I had a co-author who, Jerry Panis, who's unfortunately passed away, but Jerry was a very brilliant guy with words. And he called me up one day and said, Andrew, I think a much better title is Power Questions. And I went, oh, why didn't I think of that? Because it is a better title. Anyway,
so
look,
quick question, just to parse it
yeah.
for people. Why do you think it's a better title? I mean, I agree instinctively, but if you break it down, why is power questions more powerful than powerful questions?
Yeah, I've been staying up at night thinking about that for years, and I'm actually not sure. It's a powerful. I mean, power is, you think of it more as a noun, right? Powerful is an adjective, and so there's something more solid about that title. It's almost like you've got two nouns that you've pulled together, right? Power and questions.
Right.
Whereas
Questions
powerful,
give you power. Yes.
yeah, exactly. Now, the truth is, we don't mean that power questions are questions that sort of dominate, and take charge. Actually,
Could be
power questions are often questions that actually give power to the other person. So for example, first of all, they're always open-ended. Power questions are open-ended. It's not, Dorie, what's your market share? It's, how is this crisis impacting your market share? You're right. So they're open-ended questions that invite conversation. I think they engage people on their real issues. Sometimes I sit down with the client and I'll say, I'll go, Dorie, so I know we have an agenda plan, but from your perspective, what's the most important issue we ought to be discussing this morning? And sometimes that agenda goes out the window and it invites the person to talk about their most important issue that morning. Or I might say, we've got 20 minutes left. What's the most important issue you want to make sure we discuss? Or what's the most valuable way to use this time together? So it draws them out. I also think they're kind of fresh and surprising. I mean, none of this, what keeps you up at night? Well, my cat keeps, sitting on my head in the middle of the night.
If someone asks, like, what keeps you up at night? Like, literally, it's like a bullet to the brain.
Yeah, it's like an old sales question.
That has jumped the shark, people. We are not allowed to use it anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had CEOs tell me that if somebody asks them that question, they kick them out of their office. So now today, let's go to right now. First of all, I think you want to lead with personal questions. And so those are really empathetic questions about how people are doing, what are the challenges they're facing, how are they balancing work and home life? Everybody's working at home right now. How's that working out for them? And so on. So I make it when I'm talking to people now, I make it a very personal conversation. And then I'll share a quick framework with you because there's lots of different questions we could be asking.
We love a framework. Give it to us, Andrew.
Yeah, I know. And I'm into, the 2x2 matrices. Any good consultant worth their salt has a 2x2 matrix. But seriously, this has been very helpful to my clients. I think about the details and the big picture, and then I think about rational versus personal and emotional. And it gives you 4 quadrants, of course. And so I want people to think about asking questions in all of those quadrants. So the first quadrant is execution, which is, like, what's going on right now? What are your biggest challenges? What are the issues you're dealing with? So they might be very tactical. The second quadrant is strategy. And, that might be asking questions around, so as we move out of this, how are you thinking about your business? Some of my other clients are looking at alternative operating models, or they're thinking about very different ways. What are some of the scenarios your leadership is thinking about, 6, 12 months from now? I mean, some forward-looking leaders are thinking about that and how business is going to change. Then you go over to the dreams quadrant, which is personal, but big picture. Now, normally a dreams question is like, so what are your aspirations? What legacy do you want to leave? But today, I think, maybe those aren't the questions you lead with because we're just stuck in things. And we go down to the 4th quadrant, which is the fears quadrant. And I think exploring, what's just the risks and the speed bumps that people are hitting, the things that they're worried about, you can ask questions there. So you might think about, asking clients questions in all those quadrants, but I would start on a very personal level first, not intrusively personal. It depends on how well you know the person. I know some of my clients, I know their families, and I ask about them.
Yeah, that's very good. And Andrew, just a quick recap for people who may have joined midstream. So your 2x4 that you're suggesting. So what are the pieces on the quadrant again? Just so we
just very quickly. I think about so in the quadrant, the y-axis is details versus big picture.
Hmm.
And the x-axis is rational versus emotional or personal, you see. And so we can ask questions in the rational quadrant, which are, about the business logistics and how's your supply chain, or how are you, dealing with compensation reviews right now, or something like that. Those are very detailed. But on the personal, emotional side, here's the interesting thing that I've learned, Dorie, over the last few years where I've been developing this material. Those personal, dream, fear questions evoke the most extraordinary client conversations. Yeah, I remember sitting in the Yale Club a few years ago with a client of mine who's the chairman of a big professional firm, down by next to Grand Central, right? The Yale Dartmouth Club, and because he belonged there, and he was retiring as chairman, and I said to him, so Bill, I'm curious. You've accomplished so much in your career. What dreams do you have? Is there something else you want to achieve? And boom, all of a sudden he canceled his next appointment, and we spent 45 minutes, talking about some really heartfelt things he wanted to do in the nonprofit sector and mentoring youth and things like that. So I found some of the greatest conversations are when you really do get into some of those more personal questions. But again, you got to do it in appropriate ways, and you got to start out lightly. By the way, one thing, sorry, I was going back to something you said a few minutes ago, Dorie. One thing, other principle so I don't forget it, I just wanted to mention to our viewers, I've always lived by the principle, build your network before you need it. Okay. Yeah. And follow the person, not the position, as a corollary. A lot of the top executives I work with today and know who are in the C-suite or even CEOs, a lot of them I met when I was younger, when they were 2, 3, 4 levels down in the organization. And so I think this is actually a great time to really be expanding your connections, getting to know people, because in some cases they're not as busy as they used to be, frankly. And so anyway, that's just a thought I wanted to throw out. Oh, there's Kitty.
Stuart, it's your big chance. What's your question for Philip the cat? We want to know.
Cats are very curious, Dorie, and that is one of my other principles, being curious about people. I love the way my daughter has a beautiful cat, and I just love the way she is always just checking out everything in the house. And
it's true. We can learn a lot. We can learn a lot from them.
Yes.
So let me just chime in for people joining us. I'm Dorie Clark. I'm here with Andrew Sobel. We both have a lot to say, a lot of opinions about building and developing client relationships during a crisis. My most recent book is called Entrepreneurial You.
Yeah.
Excellent
book.
Thank you. It features Andrew in it. That's part of why it's an exciting
Really? I didn't know that. You see, I had no idea, Dorie, that I would.
Shocker.
Wow.
So yes, it's about how to think more entrepreneurially, how to develop multiple income streams. Andrew Sobel, author of the new book coming out next week, It Starts with Clients. If you guys, presumably you might have found out about this because you follow either Andrew or myself on LinkedIn, but it's possible if you are on our email list or something like that, if we are not connected on LinkedIn already, what I'd like to suggest, open another window in your browser, go to my LinkedIn profile and follow me there. Go to Andrew's LinkedIn profile and follow him there. Almost every day we have updates, we have articles, we have news that we're sharing with you guys that we hope can be helpful to you about building client relationships and business development during this challenging time. So we want to stay in touch with you on all the platforms. And so John, my trusty assistant, has been texting me with questions that you guys are asking. Please keep them coming, folks. We are excited to have them. And so one that came in right now, Tim had a question, Andrew. We'd love to get your opinion. He says, I feel reluctant to contact clients right now because I'm sure they're consumed with the coronavirus and they're in crisis mode. Is there a good way of saying I'm here if you need me? How would you do that?
Okay. So this gets back to actually your original point about, how do we add value and stay in touch and so on. So the fact is, there are going to be some clients where literally they're in absolute crisis mode. They don't, they probably don't want to hear from you in the next couple of weeks. However, I think there are other clients who Well, let me frame it differently, because I've had other clients say to me, "Gee, I email people, I call them. It's like they don't even want to hear from me. What the heck? What the heck can I do?" And so I think starting on the personal level is great, just to say, yes, I want to know how you're doing, how your family's doing. I'm here for you. But you can't say that more than once or twice, right? It's not like every week you're going to be typing, "Hey, I'm thinking about you," and so on.
It gets creepy at a certain point.
It does get a little creepy. Yes, I would agree. And so here's how I think about it. Let me be a little contrarian here. And clients like us have concerns and needs. They will make time for someone who they perceive as having an idea or a solution or something that might be helpful to them. They will make time. So let me give you just a personal analogy, because recently the basement of my son's house flooded. And so I've been talking to him about that. Let's say your basement floods and somebody comes up to your door, knocks on the door and says, "Hey, I'm a general contractor. I've got a full suite of design services." And you might go, "Listen, buddy, I am up to my knees in water. Get lost." A guy drives up in his truck, rings your doorbell and says, "Hey, I happen to see water leaking out of your house. I actually have a sump pump in the back of my pickup truck, and I think it might be helpful." So I realize it's an extreme example, but the point is, you would immediately go, "Holy cow, I want to talk to you."
In New York, you'd be like, "Did you cause the flood?"
Exactly. So here's my point. Think about your clients. You don't need that much imagination to kind of make a list of what are the potential things they're dealing with right now, right? They're dealing with, for example, keeping their own customers and clients. So I'm working with a lot of my clients on how do they do what we're talking about. But depending on your specialty, make a list of the kinds of things they're going to be dealing with, right? And then make a list of, pick some of those issues out and make a list of some of the things you're hearing about that people are doing or ideas you might have. And then if I wanted to stay in touch that way, maybe once a week, once every 10 days, I might write a short email to 20 or 30 of my clients and say, "Hey, I know you're busy, but here are 3 ideas that you may have well thought of already, but that I'm hearing about from my other clients or that I'm seeing in the market. And I hope these are helpful, and I'd be happy to discuss any of these." In other words, I think you have to be seen as adding value and coming up with ideas. And here's how it works. And you know this better than anyone. You might send a couple of those emails a month for the next 3 months, no response, but suddenly the one you send where there is the kernel of an idea and that client happens to be concerned with that, that's why we do newsletters and blogs and things like that, because you never know which one is going to hit, right? I've had people, top execs, look at my newsletter headlines for 5 years, not even read them, and suddenly call me and say, "Now that's an idea I need to discuss with you." So I would be really thoughtful and creative about it, and view yourself as being in the business over the coming months of periodically, maybe weekly, putting some ideas or suggestions or sharing some intel with people. And I think eventually you may see some pickup from some clients and they're like, "Hey, that's an idea, yeah, let's chat." I don't know. What's your take on this, Dorie?
Yeah, I think that's really helpful, Andrew. Thank you for that. And just picking up on a point that you raised, newsletters can actually be incredibly valuable here because, as Andrew said, there's only so many times it can be like, "Andrew, I'm thinking about you. Andrew, I'm thinking about your family.
Are
Andrew,
you?
I'm thinking about what you're wearing." Like, you just don't want to, you don't want to keep going there. So you do that once, but also what newsletters and social media can do is they can create ambient awareness so that you are, you're staying top of mind. You're reminding people that you're out there. You're reminding people that you're providing helpful information, but you're not like shoving it down their throat, which is why it's so valuable to be cultivating a newsletter list and a social media following so you can stay in touch with people. Yeah. And I'll just mention, every single week I send out articles on mine. If people are not on my email list and want to join, go to dorieclark.com/subscribe, and you can get on my email list and actually see an example of how I do it. If you go to Andrew's website, andrewsobel.com, you can join his list, which is really fantastic. But in the meantime, Andrew, I wanted to ask you another really great question that came in. Yuri had a question. They wanted to know, in this COVID-19 time, so we've been talking about how to reach out to existing clients, but in this COVID-19 time, should we approach new clients? How do we handle that with people that we don't already have a relationship with?
Yeah, so, I'm not sure that the rules have totally changed about how to approach new clients. If you think about it, the whole process of business development is it's building your recognition, which we should talk about because you're a real expert on that. And by the way, we should come back to that because this is actually a great time to sharpen your own saw, I think, and build your thought leadership. And so I'd love to come back and hear your comments on that. But anyway, I don't think the process changes dramatically. It's probably harder now, but it's a question of getting recognized in your market so that people see you as having something of value. Look, people want to build relationships with you because you have something of value to offer them. We're not talking about friendship here. We're talking about professional relationships. And so it's based on, actually, if you think about it, access to new buyers is based on three things, I believe. It's your brand or your reputation, the perception that you have valuable ideas or solutions to offer them, and it's based on relationships. Those three things, really. It's that reputation and recognition. It's the perception that you've got some good ideas and solutions, and then it's relationships. Most executives have told me, and I've interviewed thousands of them, that they won't take a new meeting with someone or a new approach. About 80% of them say, unless they're introduced to me by a friend or colleague, or, so especially at the higher levels, always look for that warm introduction of someone who can say, hey, this is someone I know, I've worked with, and, it's worth a chat. I do think, and, this is a reformed sinner here saying this, a dinosaur in the age of the internet. Because I grew up in the...
Faxing, Andrew? Are you going to suggest we fax?
Yeah, I grew up in the age of faxes, and things like that. But, voicemail. Anyway, a lot of my clients now have success cultivating an initial relationship with executives online, especially if that person is active in social media, if they blog, if they publish, if they post. I've had many clients very successfully, comment on people's blogs and posts, suggest resources to them, connect with them on LinkedIn, find mutual connections, and then grow that eventually to a phone call or hopefully someday a face-to-face meeting. So I think that all those rules apply. And you're looking to connect with a client around an urgent issue or need where that you can build their trust in your ability to deliver a solution. So I don't think the laws of gravity have changed. It's just harder. And so here's the thing. You're going to have to reach out more. So if before, you had 10 conversations, 10, I call them upfront conversations or outreach conversations. And let's just say, for sake of argument, 3 of those identified an interesting issue of mutual interest. And then 1 of those ended up into a proposal. I mean, that's how it works. It is kind of a formula. Now you might have to outreach to 20 or 30 to get those 3 possible issues of mutual interest leading to a proposal. So you're gonna have to be a lot more active. But the basic rules haven't changed. And think about enhancing your recognition, getting a warm introduction, and proposing ideas to people that will match their agenda.
Yeah, that's very good, Andrew. I think that's really helpful. So I just want to dig into something that you raised, which I think is an important point, which is that building your own brand can be very helpful in developing client relationships, which it sounds like those 2 things might not necessarily have a lot in common, but you argue that they do. Let's parse that a little bit more. What do they have in common? How do they work together?
So first of all, because I think we have a mix of viewers, some might be independent business people. They might have a small firm. Others, a lot of my clients might work for, the big four or, big banks or something. So there's the personal brand and there's the institutional brand. So with my clients, we talk about both of those. Here's the thing. Even if you work for a great company like, some of my clients, PwC or Ernst & Young or Grant Thornton or Citibank, that's a great brand, but it gets you into the RFPs. It might get you into the competitive bids. It might get you a first meeting, but it doesn't get you sole source business. And so the personal brand is necessary, whether you're a small business or a large business. You have to build that personal brand.
Andrew, I want to chime in just in case someone
jump in, please.
With the term sole source business, that means where the client just gives you the work without making you go through the super annoying RFP or request process. So
exactly.
we want all our work to be sole source because people say, oh my goodness, the only person who could possibly do this for me is
Dorie Clark.
Or is
absolutely. Yeah. So I believe that the personal brand is critical to getting sole source business. The institutional brand definitely gets you in the RFPs. And so, think about it this way, especially, I work with some very senior executives, and when they're thinking about hiring someone, but this is true, even if you serve small businesses and you're talking to the owner, founder of a small business, they're going to want to work with someone who they believe has deep experience solving the problem that they need to solve. And how do they know that? Well, it's because of all the things you talk about, Dorie. And maybe I'll turn it over to you for that. But you've got to, so that here's the thing, your credibility starts before you walk in the door or before you make that first phone call. You can, through that brand and reputation, when people get on the phone with you already, they're saying, with me, they'll say, hey, Andrew, I've read a couple of your books. And I don't have to sit there and say, hey, I'm great. I've written books and look at me and all this stuff. I'm just like, yeah, that's wonderful. I'm glad you, benefited from those books. Right away, that same with you. You've written some, 3 fantastic books and like stand out and so on. And so people, you want to build that reputation before you walk in the door. Otherwise, you walk in and you're going to spend the first half of the meeting or the first half of the phone call, trying to build your credibility. Now, by the way, one of the best ways to build that credibility, if they don't know you very well, is through credibility building questions. I just want to give people a little tip here. This is my secret weapon.
Okay, pay attention, everyone. Pay attention.
Yeah, okay. Credibility building questions. Instead of saying, I'm Andrew Sobel and I've written books or I've done this or I blah, 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 because by the way, third-party endorsements are trusted more than your own self adulation or whatever, right? Very simple concept, credibility building question. State an incisive observation about the industry or the market or problems your clients are facing and flip it into a question. So I'll give you my version of that. I might be talking to a head of global sales, and I might say, who wants to they want their salespeople to be trusted advisors to CEOs or something. And I might say, in my research, I have found that there are 3 barriers to moving from a transactional sales orientation to a more trusted advisor solutions orientation. And here's what those barriers are. And I'll say, number 1, number 2, I might talk about measurement and reward as a barrier. I might talk about the expert mindset that people have. And then I do it quickly. This takes 15, 20 seconds. And then I'll say, but I'm curious, in your organization, what are the specific barriers you've encountered? Okay. And so, and I'm just making an observation and then flipping it into a question. And that's typically how I like to establish my credibility, because it's real, it's authentic, it's adding value in the conversation. So I want everyone out there to think about what are their credibility building questions. And today it could be, last week I talked to a half dozen of my clients, and there's a couple of issues they're all dealing with right now. One of them has to do with this and this and this. And, but I'm curious, how are you grappling with this particular issue? And you're instantly adding value because you're gathering intelligence for them. You see what I mean? So, but Dorie, turning it over to you, this seems like a great time in the coming weeks and months to build our thought leadership, build, sharpen the saw, build our skills. And it seems to me, again, like you, maybe I have two types of clients. Some are more smaller businesses or individual practitioners, but also or younger professionals who are just getting started. And then there's maybe older professionals who have an expertise, they have a client base, but things are tough now. What ideas could you share with us about, how we sharpen that saw, build that thought leadership?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. And absolutely. And it actually ties in with a question that came in from Brenda. Brenda said, how do you get to build your own community when you're starting your coaching business or consulting business during these times? And so one of the things that I talk about a lot, I have developed a framework around the concept of how you become a recognized expert in your company or in your industry. And there's really three components to that. One, that Andrew, we're talking about is social proof. What is the credibility that you are evincing to your buyers? That could come from the fact that you've worked with other clients that are well known, that they've heard of before. It could come from the fact that you write for established publications. Maybe you've been ahead of a local or regional or even national professional association. So social proof is one. Your network is another. Very important to develop a robust network.
Social proof network, yeah.
And then the third is content creation. And this is something that I personally am doubling down on during this kind of shutdown time. And I also recommend that a lot of other people do it as well, because, I was going to be spending 3 out of 4 weeks in April on the road. I am currently now going to spend 0 out of 4 weeks in April on the road. And what that means, not being on airplanes, not schlepping around, is that we can actually be writing those articles. We can be creating videos, creating podcasts, whatever our medium is, to share our expertise. And so to Brenda's point, when you are sharing your ideas, when you're putting them out there, it is basically just putting out a beacon to other people to say, here's what I stand for. Here's how I see things. Do you agree with that? And oftentimes people will say, oh my gosh, that's exactly how I see things. I love how this woman thinks. Sign me up. And they're going to want to follow you on LinkedIn. They're going to want to subscribe to your newsletter. They're going to want to get more of that content. But that can't happen. You can't get a following if you don't put your ideas out there in the first place so that people can find you and say, yes, that really resonates with me.
Yeah. And, Dorie, some of my clients will say, well, gee, Andrew, we're not like you. We don't write, we don't love to write, or we're not very good writers, or, we don't like to speak, and, that kind of thing. And, one idea that I often share with them is that, look, if you're starting from scratch, this is on the content creation side. Guys, I love your framework about the social proof, the network, and the content creation. So I have to look and see where I'm weakest, because I think, I say to them, look, you're pretty experienced. Make your implicit knowledge and experience explicit. It's just very simple. And I actually will say to them, okay, so what's a tough, I did this once actually a couple of years ago with a client in a workshop. And I said, what's a tough problem your client is facing? And this particular individual worked with media companies and publishing companies. And he said, well, it's really it's all around millennials and how they like to be educated and how they absorb information. I said, okay, so that's the challenge. So put together a one-pager on the five ways millennials love to learn and how content providers can adapt to that. And a week later, actually, he sent it to me, and it was really well done.
Yeah.
It was 1 page, 5 points, and this was an engineer who thought he couldn't write. And he then began sharing that with some clients. And he said that in just a couple of weeks, he generated about 7 really productive client conversations on this one little one-pager. And so I've actually been collecting these one-pagers over the years, my own one-pagers on client relationships. How do you move up in the organization? How do you work with clients older than you? How do you work with clients younger than you? Which is mostly the case with me these days. It's weird, Dorie. So most of the first half of my career, everyone was so much older than me. And then all of a sudden they were younger than me. And I really don't understand what happened. But so I love this. I love these little sort of one-pagers where you take an issue and just break it down. Anyway, that's been something that's been helpful to me in my own practice.
Yeah, that's really great, Andrew. Thank you. And it's true. If you're inside a company, the key is sharing your ideas. I am platform agnostic. It does not matter how. It could be doing a lunch and learn, which these days is maybe a virtual lunch and learn to transmit your ideas. It could be sharing information on the Slack channel or the corporate internal social network, saying, "Hey, I tried this new way of doing something and it worked really well. Maybe it would be helpful to you." Whatever it is, but it's making your ideas known in a way so that other people can consume them. But this leads to another question, Andrew, that has been coming up a lot in the chat here. People are asking, Richard, among others, asked about pro bono work. He says, do you think there's value or danger in offering pro bono help in this situation? Does it erode your value or show your values? What do you think?
So this is a very tricky kind of line to tread. And let's talk about, I can't comment on individual situations, but let me share some principles that I think can guide your decision making. So first, and I'm going to contradict myself as I go through this a little bit because it is a tension.
So first of all, what minute works for you, Andrew? Go for it.
Yeah. So first of all, clients rarely make decisions based on price. All the research shows that it's typically third or fourth, and as long as you're not like twice as expensive as someone else, or, usually if it's within, 10, 20, even 30%, they make decisions based on the best fit, the best experience, the best solution. So
if they are making decisions based solely on price, you do not even want that client to begin with. That is a
great point. Yeah, because then it's like you're selling cement or sheet metal, right? That's a commodity and you make decisions purely based on price. So let's get that out of the way. Clients aren't going to suddenly decide to buy something from you because you give them a 10% discount. Now, that said, on the other side, I think generosity is a fundamental and underrated kind of factor in relationships. You think about it, the most sort of high praise we can give someone, whether in our personal lives or at work, is they're a very generous person. They're generous with their time. They're generous with their wisdom. They're generous with their social capital and that kind of thing. And, Adam Grant writes about this a lot, of course, in like his book, Give and Take, the Wharton professor, who you probably know. Anyway, so I do believe in generosity. Now, generosity doesn't necessarily mean saying, "Oh, I'm just going to give everything away for free." But generosity is perhaps at a time like this saying, I'd love to do a free session, or I'd like to, would it be helpful if I interviewed a couple members of your team and shared that feedback with you, or something like that. Or it could just be advice, being a sounding board. So I do believe in generosity, and the other thing is, look, to the extent you have relationship clients that have worked with you for years, I have right now, my oldest client is about more than 20 years. I've been working with them 25 years. I've got quite a few I've worked with for 10 or 15 years. And, you do want to realize that they've made a big investment in you over the years. And so I think, I'm not trying to create a caste system here, but I think if you've got some clients that have been really good to you over the years, you may want to make sure that you also are really helpful and generous with them. But here's the thing, no blanket policy here. I think it's case by case. Every client's a market of one. Some clients are truly in dire financial straits. Some clients, are feeling it, but maybe are doing okay. And so on. So, and, some clients, you just need to look at each situation. But I believe in you should be generous. Doing pro bono things are fine. But remember, okay, this is another principle. It's just as hard to give something away as it is to sell it. Think about that one. And Dorie, it's true. So in both cases, just because you're going to give something away doesn't mean something, oh, great, we'll take it. There has to be a client. There has to be an executive or manager who has a need. There has to be stakeholder alignment to do the thing. They have to trust that you have a good solution to offer, right? All the things that apply in a sale for money apply in giving something away. So I would also be very, in other words, you almost have to go through your sales process to give something away It's not like you just call up and say, here, it's for free. No, you have to make sure there's a need. You have to make sure you've got somebody who can actually implement what you're offering. Does that make you see what I'm saying?
Totally. I think that's a great point, Andrew. I love what you said. I'll also just add to it in a literal sense. If we're talking about pro bono things for, like, say, nonprofits, it is possible that for certain folks, people might suddenly have a lot of white space on their calendar. Maybe clients cancel projects. Maybe there's open time. And if there is, volunteering strategically with a nonprofit is actually a pretty good thing to do, especially, let's pretend you're an executive coach. If you were to reach out to the executive director of a nonprofit that is important to you, many nonprofits, of course, are very hit hard during this time. They can't afford a consultant. They can't afford a nonprofit, executive coach. And if you said, hey, I'm willing to help out with you, and hey, even better, I'll do a strategy retreat with the board, something like that, where you have the opportunity to make a lot of connections. It's really a win-win. So that can be quite helpful as well.
That's a great idea. Nonprofits are suffering mightily now, I believe, and it's going to be a tough year for them, just as it's going to be a difficult year for a lot of for-profit businesses. By the way, just a twist on the thought leadership piece. I think a great value add right now is education for clients. So that's just one way that you can add value, and it may not even cost you that much, in the sense that you have something valuable to say. And so I think offering to do a seminar on a skill area or on a topic for a client, just providing some educational resources could be a great way of adding value.
Yeah, that's terrific. I wanted to read a question from our audience. And by the way, we're sort of coming into the denouement of our time together. We've got about 10 minutes left, guys. So if you have last minute questions, please type them into the chat box. And I'll also mention, if you have been enjoying this chat, please click like, please click share on LinkedIn, so that you can spread the word to your colleagues, so that they can experience this as well. But so we had a great question that came in from Tony. Tony said, I've been sending out non-COVID related articles and content, asking clients if they have COVID content fatigue, and commenting if they would like a break. Here's some fresh content. Here's something different. I've been getting positive feedback. Do you have thoughts about this? What's your take on that, Andrew?
Well, I think he's given us the answer, which is that there probably can be such a thing as COVID fatigue, both metaphorically and literally, if you catch it. I mean, I've been bombarded similarly, and there is a certain point where you kind of go, okay, I'm overdosing on this. And so here's what I'm doing personally with some of the blogs I'm writing. I'm looking at it and I'm saying, I literally read it and say, okay, is this going to come across as off tone, off color, or a bit off key right now, or is this some evergreen advice that people will feel like, hey, actually that's a good reminder, and if I feel like it might be a little off color or off key to people, what I'm doing is I might edit a bit and put a few sentences in at the top and the bottom, framing a little bit in current times. And so it's not pure, here's advice for, COVID-19 times, but
how to capitalize on the COVID-19.
Yeah, right. Like, this is another communication that's going to capitalize. And I mean, I've seen, look, something else we could talk about is what not to do, but I think I have seen some very commercial things that I thought were off key and probably didn't. So I would be very careful about.
Now we're curious, Andrew. Give us, a couple.
Well, I've seen people make special offers on courses or e-learning or seminars or something, and make special offers. But then when you looked at it, it wasn't, they weren't really giving away much. They were trying to entice you into trying one thing and then pay anyway. So I think you got to be very careful about that. But so I just look at what you're writing. And if you think it's evergreen and people are going to appreciate it, great. You don't have to mention COVID-19. If you think it's going to be a little off, people might go, then try to frame it properly. That's at least what I've been doing.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. So Dan had a question, Andrew. He wanted to know, what if you plan to launch your business in April? How do you recommend to proceed? I think Andrew can empathize because he planned to launch his book in April.
Well, it's being launched, whether I like it or not. It's like a child being born. After 9 months, you can't stop it. So you got to give the child a welcoming environment, no matter how tough things are. I have several friends who just launched businesses, actually, so I can really empathize. And it may be that you're going to have to go back to some of the basics that Dorie and I have been talking about in this webcast. And I liked your framework around building your content. So it may be you may have a little more time now to really build the content and the thought leadership around that business and all the marketing things. And building your network, I think, was your second one, right? You need your network. And I think, again, build your network before you need it. So this is a great time to build your connections and relationships before it. And then, the other thing is, look, you may have to reconsider your business plan a little bit and say, what does a plan B look like if we're in for 6 to 12 months of hardship, economic hardship, and a health crisis. I mean, because this isn't going to just disappear in 4 weeks. I know we have some politicians who would like it to disappear. I would like it to disappear, Dorie, but it's not. I'm afraid. I've read enough to know that. So I think look at Dorie's. I like your framework. Look at your social media, your social proof. Look at your network and the content you're building, and then look at your plan B. And could you redeploy your idea against a slightly different set of needs than what perhaps you had originally intended?
Yeah, that's very good, Andrew. I think you're right. And it reminds me actually of something that I talked about with my friend William Aruda, who I also profiled in Entrepreneurial You. And he told me a story, which I actually recounted in the book, that when he launched his business now about 20 years ago, it was right around sort of the intersection of the .com crash and then 9/11. And he was very early on the bandwagon of personal branding. And first of all, business, in general was not good. But second of all, because, he was in the vanguard, everybody else is like, what is personal branding and why would I care? So there was not a lot of market. But he said that what that did give him an opportunity to do was he spent a couple of years very intensively creating his frameworks and creating his methodology. And so when the market kind of caught up with him, he was able to pounce and really be successful because he had built all the resources that he needed. He was actually able to create a certification program for other trainers, things like that. So there are ways, whether it's building content, building out your ideas, that you can capitalize on this. And Andrew, a kind of appropriate last question. Brian is interested in your books. He says, wow, you have a lot of books about client relationships. He says, might you ask him how the new one adds to or changes the narrative of the earlier books? So if someone is already an Andrew Sobel fan,
sure,
what can they expect that is new and different in It Starts With Clients, your new book?
So It Starts With Clients. I have to show you the cover because I love the cover right there. And it comes out early next week, so you can get it, order it now, order it early next week. Basically, this book takes pretty much everything that I have learned through my research, 8,000 interviews with top executives and rainmakers over the last 25 years, and puts it, and especially a lot of new things I've looked at in the last 5 years, and it puts it into a system for growing your client base. So from start to finish. And it starts out with some basic ideas about, selecting ideal clients, building your reputation, the whole client to business development process, up to some pretty sophisticated topics like reframing issues, connecting in the C-suite, and so on. So it's a total system. And I've built it around kind of a 100-day idea. So it's, week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, and you have a challenge each week. And by the way, I've built a growth guide to go with it, and a 100-day challenge that a lot of my clients are coming into. And people are going to get 15 emails, one a week, for that 100 days with assignments to help them grow their client relationships. And so you can, if you go to my website, you can sign up for it there at andrewsobel.com. But that's kind of the how it's different in the sense I view this as the capstone book. I'll never say never, but I'm not sure. This may be not my last book, but my last book on this topic. So it kind of is a capstone, and I'm very bullish on it.
That's fantastic, Andrew. Appreciate it. Looks like we have had over the past hour 3,300 different viewers. We have had over 700 comments and people participating. So we're so appreciative to folks who took the time to join us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Wow.
Yeah, obviously this is a pressing topic right now. Everybody is trying to figure out what all this means. We have not seen these conditions worldwide in anybody's lifetime. So we are navigating new waters and trying to do the best that we can with it. And so as part of the process, one of the great things that we can do is turn to knowledgeable, thoughtful people. And Andrew is really one of the pros, having written so many books about client relationships, including, of course, the new one, It Starts with Clients. So really happy to have the chance to talk with you, Andrew. For viewers who are interested in staying in touch, again, follow me on LinkedIn, and you can get daily updates. Follow Andrew on his LinkedIn profile, and all of our articles and information is at dorieclark.com, andrewsobel.com. Any last words to our fair viewers, Andrew?
I tell you, and I'd be interested in your take, but I find that it's important for us to stay centered in dealing with our clients, and it's not easy nowadays. And so I have made it a practice every day of doing things to center myself. And that's going to be different for different people. But just in my case, I take 30 to 45 minutes each morning, and I both pray and meditate to center myself. And again, I'm not saying you should do that, but you ought to do something. And the other thing is I try to focus on, the transcendent, on the long term, because if I'm just churning through the news, honestly, my heart starts racing because, I've got siblings and lots of friends who are older, and this thing is frightening. So I like to, during the day, I take small breaks. I'll play my guitar for 5 minutes, but focus on the long-term and the transcendent. For some people, that could be a religious faith, a higher power, a concept of love. I don't know, but there's more than just the daily news cycle, and we need to stay centered. So I don't know. What's one thing you do, Dorie? Quickly, I'm curious.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Well, I'm, of course, as I mentioned, coming to you here from the worldwide center of our COVID pandemic, New York City. And, a lot of people that I know have kind of fled to different places. I was not interested in doing that. I was interested in staying in Manhattan, partly so I could continue to get a stream of takeout and delivery. That was very important to me. But also, one of the things that I do and have done every day this week, which has been quite nice, and in fact, I may keep it up as a practice after all this is over, is, of course, we are allowed and in fact encouraged to go out to exercise because, the gym in my building is shut. So you're not really going to get exercise if you don't go outside. So every morning I have been going out and taking a walk by the river. And fortunately, living in the financial district, I can alternate. So on opposite
East River, Hudson River.
East Hudson, exactly. So I go back and forth. And some days I get a beautiful view of the Brooklyn Bridge. Some days I get a beautiful view of the Statue of Liberty. So it's lovely. It's very soothing, and I really enjoy being outside and getting to see that as well.
Fantastic, Dorie. Thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I think we should trademark this and call it Client Talk. Like after the Car Talk on NPR, Car Talk, or as they would say, Car Talk. We could call it Client Talk. Hey, I lived in New Hampshire for a while. I can, and Boston. So this has been great. Maybe we'll do an encore at some point. So thank you so much for hosting this for us. It's just been wonderful to work with you on it.
Thanks, Andrew. It's been a lot of fun, and thank you to all the folks who have tuned in and asked questions and joined us. One of the best things that we can do in these kind of crazy times where, most of us have to stay where we are is to continue to engage with with people, with conversations, to keep leveling up, to keep learning and building our skills. So we're so happy to have spent this time with you, and have a great day, a great weekend, and stay safe, everybody.
Stay safe.
Thanks.